The ballroom of the Oriental Hotel sparkled like 1,000 stars had fallen from the sky. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting golden light over 500 of the most powerful people in Lagos. At exactly 7:30 in the evening, the lights dimmed. A single spotlight hit the stage where a woman in a royal blue dress stood behind a microphone, holding her baby. Her voice was clear and strong as she spoke words that would destroy reputations and change lives forever. Hello family, welcome back. Please hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, it really supports our channel. Don't forget to share with your friends and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. And please tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now sit back, relax and enjoy the story. 1 year ago, my husband handed me divorce papers at my father's graveside while I was 7 months pregnant, she said calmly. Behind her, a massive screen lit up with text messages, bank statements, and medical records that made the entire room gasp in shock. How did a heartbroken, abandoned wife become the most powerful woman in the room? And what secrets was she about to reveal? 3 months earlier, the story had been very different. Victoria stood at Ikoyi Cemetery under the hot Lagos sun. Her black dress clung to her swollen belly. Tears streamed down her face as she watched workers lower her father's casket into the red earth. Chief Adebayo had died 3 days ago, and the pain felt like a knife in her chest. Around her, mourners whispered prayers and dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. The priest's voice droned on about eternal rest and God's mercy. Victoria could barely hear him over the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Heavy footsteps that she knew too well. Victoria, sign these papers. She turned around slowly. Her husband Daniel stood there in his expensive black suit, holding a manila envelope. His face was cold and hard, like she was a stranger instead of the woman he'd married 2 years ago. What? Victoria's voice came out as barely a whisper. The divorce papers, Daniel said flatly. He pulled documents from the envelope and thrust them toward her. I need you to sign them. Now. Victoria felt the world spinning around her. Her legs went weak. Daniel, my father just died. I'm carrying your child. This can't be. This is exactly when it needs to happen, Daniel interrupted. His jaw was tight with anger. I'm done pretending, Victoria. You're too simple for me. Too boring. You don't understand my world or my ambitions. I need someone who matches my vision. Behind him, Victoria saw her. Blessing, Daniel's colleague from his law firm, standing there in a black dress that probably cost more than Victoria's entire wardrobe. Her hand rested on her own flat stomach in a gesture that suddenly made horrible sense. You're leaving me for her? Victoria's voice cracked with pain. At my father's funeral? I'm leaving you because I'm not happy, Daniel said coldly. Blessing understands me. She's pregnant too and she needs me. She makes me feel alive. You make me feel trapped. The word hit Victoria like a slap across the face. Around them, mourners had stopped pretending not to watch. Victoria felt their eyes burning into her skin. She felt their judgment and pity and silent questions about what she had done wrong. What would Victoria do now? Would she sign away her marriage at her father's grave? Daniel's parents stood 20 feet away beneath a black umbrella even though it wasn't raining. His mother, Mrs. Okafor, had a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It was a smile of satisfaction, like she'd just won a game Victoria didn't even know they were playing. His father's arms were crossed over his chest, nodding slightly like Daniel had finally done something right. This wasn't a spontaneous decision, Victoria realized with growing horror. This had been planned. Orchestrated. They had waited for her weakest moment and turned her father's burial into the stage for her destruction. Sign it, Daniel said again, thrusting the papers closer to her face. His expensive Rolex watch caught the afternoon sunlight. Everything about him screamed success and power, everything she thought they were building together. But not with her anymore. Victoria's hands shook as she took the envelope. She looked down at her father's grave, at the fresh earth covering the man who had raised her with love and wisdom. Chief Adebayo had been a quiet man, a bookkeeper for small businesses his whole life. He'd lived modestly, driven an old Toyota, never shown any signs of wealth. If only you knew, Papa, Victoria thought. If only you could see what's happening to me right now. But maybe he had known. Maybe that's why he'd always told her, patience, Victoria. Let people reveal who they are, then show them what you're made of. She signed the papers right there at her father's graveside because fighting now, in front of everyone, would change nothing. Daniel had already left her in every way that mattered. The pen scratched across the paper. Her signature looked shaky and broken, just like her heart. Good, Daniel snatched the papers back immediately. My lawyer will contact you about the details. You can keep the flat for now. I'll be moving in with Blessing. He turned and walked away without another word. No jug. No apology. No acknowledgement of the vows he'd shattered or the life growing inside her that he was abandoning. Blessing linked her arm through Daniel's as they walked toward the line of expensive cars parked along the cemetery road. She glanced back at Victoria with a look that said clearly, I won. Victoria stood there as the cemetery workers began shoveling red earth onto her father's casket. The sound of dirt hitting wood was the only sound in the world, that and her own heartbeat pounding in her ears like drums. The mourners dispersed quickly, uncomfortable with the scene they'd witnessed. Some offered meaningless condolences that felt like insults. Sorry for your loss. Stay strong. God knows best. Others avoided her eyes entirely, like divorce was a disease they might catch. Victoria waited until everyone left. Until the workers finished their job and departed. Until she was completely alone except for the fresh grave and the weight of her shattered life pressing down on her shoulders. I don't know what to do, Papa, she whispered to the grave. Hot tears streamed down her face. He left me here at your burial. How does someone do that? The Lagos wind picked up, rustling through the palm trees overhead. And something inside Victoria shifted. Grief mixed with rage. Humiliation mixed with determination. Her father had taught her many things, but the most important lesson was this. Never let them see you break. What Victoria didn't know yet was that her father had left her something that would change everything. But would she discover it in time? The flat felt emptier than it had any right to feel. Victoria sat on the couch where Daniel used to hold her, where they'd laughed about baby names, where they'd planned their future together. Now the walls seemed to close in on her, making it hard to breathe. 3 days had passed since the burial. 3 days since her world ended. The divorce papers sat on the coffee table, mocking her every time she walked past them. Daniel's lawyer kept calling, demanding she sign additional documents to speed up the process. Stop being difficult, the lawyer had said yesterday. Difficult. She was 7 months pregnant, grieving her father and watching her marriage disintegrate. But she was being difficult. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages she didn't want to read. Daniel's sister had texted, "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Just sign everything and let him move on." His mother wrote, "My son deserves happiness. Stop being selfish." Selfish. The word made Victoria want to scream into her pillow. Friends who used to invite her out had gone silent. The ones who did reach out came with questions disguised as concern. What happened between you two? Did you know about Blessing? Were there problems we didn't see? Each question felt like an accusation, like they were searching for proof that she'd caused this somehow. That Daniel's betrayal was her fault. Victoria stopped answering her phone. She stopped checking social media. She stopped pretending she was okay when every breath felt like drowning in deep water. She spent her days in her father's study, the one room in the flat that still felt safe. His old accounting books lined the shelves. The faint smell of his cologne still lingered in the air like a ghost. It was there, on the 5th day after the burial, that everything changed. Victoria was looking for her father's address book, thinking maybe there was someone who could help her figure out what to do next. Some distant relatives. Some old friends. Anyone who might care. The drawer stuck when she pulled it. She forced it open with both hands and something fell out from underneath. An envelope. Cream-colored and sealed with her name written in her father's careful handwriting. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a letter and a small silver key that gleamed in the afternoon light. "My dearest Victoria," the letter began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I pray you never needed this letter. But knowing the world we live in, knowing the people who surround you, I prepared for the worst." Victoria's heart began to pound faster. She kept reading, her eyes moving quickly across her father's familiar handwriting. "In the safe deposit box at First Bank of Lagos, box number 447, you'll find documents that will change everything. Accounts, properties, investments. I've spent 40 years building something that nobody knows about. I built it for you, for moments like this when people show you who they really are." Victoria read the words again. Then again. Accounts? Properties? Her father had been a bookkeeper who lived in a modest flat and drove a 15-year-old Toyota. What was he talking about? "Trust no one until they've earned it," the letter continued. "Protect yourself and my grandchild. And remember, patience is the greatest weapon you'll ever have. I love you more than words can express. Show them what an Adebayo woman is made of. Papa." Victoria's hands shook so badly the paper rattled. She grabbed the key in her bag, not even bothering to change out of her nightgown and wrapper. She threw on a headscarf and rushed to her car. What had her father hidden in that bank? And how would it change everything? The safe deposit room at First Bank of Lagos was cold and private. An attendant led Victoria to a small windowless room, then left her alone with box 447. Victoria's hands shook so badly she could barely fit the key in the lock. When she finally opened it, she gasped out loud. Inside were folders upon folders of legal documents, account statements, property deeds, and numbers that made her head spin. She pulled out the first folder and opened it with trembling fingers. $1 billion. Her father had accumulated $1 billion across international investments, commercial properties in Lagos, Abuja, and London, stakes in technology companies, and carefully managed portfolios that had grown exponentially over 4 decades. Victoria sat on the cold floor of that bank room with documents spread around her like pieces of an impossible puzzle. Her mouth hung open in shock. Oh, how had her father done this? She pulled out paper after paper, each one revealing another layer of her father's secret empire. A 15% stake in a telecommunications company. Property holdings across 3 continents. Private equity investments in startups that had exploded in value. Blue-chip stocks. Government bonds. Real estate developments in Victoria Island and Lekki. Chief Adebayo hadn't just been a bookkeeper. He'd been a genius, quietly building wealth while everyone around him assumed he was barely getting by. At the bottom of the box was another letter. Victoria's vision blurred with tears as she unfolded it. "You're probably in shock," her father had written. "Good. Use that shock as fuel. These assets are structured to protect you completely. Daniel has no claim to any of it. His family has no power here. Take your time. Learn everything. Then when you're ready, show them exactly what they lost when they underestimated you." Victoria's breath caught in her throat as she read the next paragraph. "The prenup they made you sign before the wedding, the one his mother insisted on to protect their modest family trust, that works in your favor now. Everything I've given you is separate. Untouchable. Be patient. Be strategic. And remember, they thought they knew your worth. They were wrong." Victoria sat in that bank room for 3 hours, absorbing the reality of what her father had done. This wasn't just money. This was power. Freedom. The ability to fight back against everyone who tried to crush her. She thought about Daniel, probably with blessing right now, celebrating his escape from his boring wife. She thought about his mother's satisfied smile at the cemetery. She thought about all the people who'd whispered and pitted and judged her. They had no idea what was coming. Victoria gathered every document carefully and placed them in her bag. She drove home with a clarity she hadn't felt in weeks. The grief was still there, heavy in her chest. The betrayal still burned like fire. But underneath it all, something new was growing. Strategy. Purpose. The beginning of a plan. That night, she finally looked at her phone. A text from Daniel glowed on the screen. "Please just sign the remaining documents. We both need to move on." Victoria stared at it for a long moment. Then she typed back 4 simple words. "You have no idea." She didn't elaborate. Didn't explain. Just let those words sit there like a promise and a warning. Victoria placed her hand on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick against her palm. "Your grandfather left us something incredible," she whispered. "And we're going to use it to teach some people a lesson they'll never forget." The game had changed. Daniel thought he'd won by walking away. Blessing thought she'd stolen the prize. The Okafor family thought they'd eliminated a problem. But they'd actually just created their worst nightmare. A woman with nothing to lose, everything to gain, and the resources to make sure justice was delivered with perfect, devastating precision. What would Victoria do next? And how would she use her father's fortune to turn the tables? The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it happened with the kind of strategic precision that would have made her father proud. Victoria spent the next week meeting with her father's lawyer, Mr. Martins, a sharp-eyed man in his 60s who had been managing Chief Adebayo's legal affairs for 20 years. "Your father was one of the most brilliant clients I've ever had," Mr. Martins said from across his desk on the 25th floor overlooking Lagos Island. "He started with almost nothing and built something most people couldn't build with 10 times the starting capital." "Why didn't he tell me?" Victoria's voice was tight with emotion. Mr. Martins smiled slightly. "Because he was protecting you. If Daniel or his family had known about this wealth, do you think they would have waited until after his death to make their move? They would have tried to control it. Control you." The words hit hard because they were true. "Every asset is in trust with you as the sole beneficiary," Mr. Martins continued, pulling out documents. "Daniel has zero claim to any of it. The prenup you signed actually works in your favor now. It clearly states that inheritance and family assets remain separate. Victoria remembered that prenup. She remembered how Mrs. Okafor had pushed it, claiming it was standard procedure for their family. Now she understood why her father had let her sign it without protest. These assets generate approximately $4.2 million monthly in passive income, Mr. Martins explained. The properties are managed by professional firms. Your father built this to be self-sustaining. $4.2 million every month. Victoria's mind struggled to process it. She'd been worried about how she'd afford diapers as a single mother. But here's what I think you're really asking, Mr. Martins said, his tone shifting. You want to know if you can use this to fight back. Victoria met his eyes. Can I? Mr. Martins smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. Your father anticipated that too. He left very specific instructions about what to do if you were ever betrayed or abandoned. He called it his justice protocol. He pulled out another folder marked with Victoria's name. Inside were strategies, contact lists, step-by-step plans for various scenarios. Her father had literally written a playbook for her comeback. Over the next 2 months, Victoria began appearing at places she'd never been before. Charity galas, business luncheons, art gallery openings. Always dressed impeccably. Always calm. Always visibly pregnant and radiating a confidence that made people curious. Her first major appearance was at a fundraiser for Lagos Hospital. She donated $500,000 and made sure the donation was very public. The room had gone silent when her name was announced as a major donor. Mrs. Okafor had been there. Victoria watched her former mother-in-law's face drain of color. Watched her lean over to whisper urgently to her companions. Watched the panic set in. But Victoria didn't acknowledge her. She simply smiled graciously, accepted the applause, and took her seat at a VIP table. Within days, the question started circulating throughout Lagos society. That's Daniel's ex-wife. Where did she get that kind of money? She carries herself like old money, doesn't she? Each appearance generated buzz. Each donation generated doubt about the version of events Daniel had been selling. 2 months later, Victoria gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Samuel. God has heard. Daniel wasn't there. Hadn't even known she was in labor. Now it was time for the final phase. Time to reveal the truth. Time for justice. What was Victoria planning? And how would she expose the lies that destroyed her marriage? The invitation was cream-colored with gold lettering. You are cordially invited to the first birthday celebration of Samuel Adebayo and the grand launch of the Chief Adebayo Foundation. Saturday, 6 p.m., the Oriental Hotel, Victoria Island. 500 invitations were sent to Lagos's most influential people. Business leaders, politicians, society figures, journalists, and buried in that list like a bomb waiting to explode, Daniel Okafor, his parents, and Blessing Bennett. The Okafor family debated for days whether to attend. They ultimately decided they had to. Staying away would look like weakness. They had no idea what was coming. The Oriental Hotel ballroom sparkled like 1,000 stars. Crystal chandeliers. Tables dressed in white and gold. 500 of Lagos's most powerful people gathered under the banner of the Chief Adebayo Foundation. Victoria arrived exactly on time, carrying baby Samuel in her arms. Her royal blue dress was elegant and fitted perfectly. She moved through the room with grace that made people instinctively step aside. Within minutes, she'd spotted them. Daniel stood near the bar looking uncomfortable. Blessing beside him, adjusting her dress constantly, never quite comfortable. Mrs. Okafor stood rigid with tension, her jewelry clanging like armor. Mr. Okafor's arms were crossed defensively. At 7:30 precisely, the lights dimmed. Mr. Martins took the podium. Please welcome Chief Adebayo's daughter, Victoria, to share some words about her father's legacy. Victoria walked to the stage as applause filled the room. When she began to speak, her voice was steady and clear. Thank you all for being here. 1 year ago, I buried my father at Ikoyi Cemetery. It was the worst day of my life. She paused. I was wrong. Because it wasn't just losing my father that made that day unbearable. It was what my husband did to me at my father's graveside. Gasps rippled through the crowd. He handed me divorce papers while they were lowering my father into the ground. I was 7 months pregnant with his child. Victoria's voice never wavered. He told me I was too simple for him. Too boring. That I didn't make him happy. He left me for someone else. The screen behind her lit up with a photograph of Chief Adebayo. Then it changed. Bank statements appeared. Property deeds. Investment portfolios. Numbers so large that several people gasped aloud. My father spent 40 years building a fortune that nobody knew about. $1 billion across investments, real estate, and business ventures worldwide. He left it all to me. Another click. Text messages appeared on the screen. Messages between Daniel and Blessing dating back 8 months. 8 months before Daniel asked for divorce. My husband didn't leave me spontaneously, Victoria said calmly. He was groomed to leave me by a woman who saw opportunity. Then came the moment that changed everything. A text message from Blessing to her friend appeared in large font. The pregnancy is fake, but he doesn't know that. It's my insurance policy to lock him down. Once I've got the baby story locked in, I'll have him completely trapped. The ballroom erupted. People turned to stare at Blessing. Phones came out immediately. Blessing's face went pale as milk. It wasn't just Blessing, Victoria continued. My former in-laws orchestrated this entire situation. Email exchanges between Mrs. Okafor and Daniel appeared on screen. That girl is not right for you. She has no ambition. Get out of this marriage. We'll help you. Mrs. Okafor's face turned purple. Her hand gripped the table. Then medical records appeared. Blessing's fertility clinic appointments. Hormone test. Every indicator proving she had never been pregnant. The pregnancy that destroyed my marriage never existed, Victoria said quietly. It was a lie from the beginning. Blessing stood and walked quickly toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Nobody stopped her. Tonight isn't about destroying anyone, Victoria said. It's about honoring my father by demonstrating what he taught me. That you don't need to scream to be heard. You just need to be patient. You just need to be strategic. You just need to have faith that the truth, when revealed at exactly the right moment, is the most powerful weapon that exists. The screen showed photographs of baby Samuel, peaceful and beautiful. The Chief Adebayo Foundation will support women leaving toxic situations. We will provide resources for children who need advocates and mothers who need protection. Because my father taught me that real power isn't about having money. Real power is about using whatever you have to make sure the people who come after you don't have to suffer the way you did. The applause began slowly, then built into something powerful. People stood. Some were crying. Everyone understood they'd just witnessed something unprecedented. Daniel sat frozen, his face a mask of devastation. His mother had her face in her hands. Victoria walked calmly back to her seat and picked up Samuel. She didn't smile triumphantly. She simply sat there, a woman holding her child, utterly composed, utterly powerful. The event continued for another 2 hours. Donors pressed business cards into Victoria's hand. Journalists lined up for interviews. Everyone wanted to be on the right side of the truth. As people began leaving, Daniel approached her. Victoria, please. Can we talk? She turned to face him, Samuel still in her arms. There's nothing left to say, Daniel. I know what I did, his voice cracked. I was manipulated. I was stupid. But please, I want to know my son. You have the rights a court decides you have, Victoria said calmly. And given that you abandoned his mother while she was carrying him, given that you chose a fake pregnancy over your real child, given that everything you've done is now public record in front of 500 witnesses, I suspect those rights will be very limited indeed. She shifted Samuel in her arms. My son's name is Samuel. God has heard. He'll grow up hearing stories about his grandfather's wisdom and patience. He'll grow up understanding that choices have consequences. Will he hear stories about me? Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. Only if he asks, Victoria said simply. And if he asks, I'll tell him the truth. That his father made choices that hurt people. That his father let himself be led by ambition and the whispers of people who were manipulating his weaknesses. And I'll tell him that choices always have consequences. Victoria walked away, carrying Samuel toward her waiting car. She didn't look back. 3 months later, Victoria stood in her father's study, now her office, managing the foundation's operations. They'd opened 4 women's shelters, funded 6 education programs, partnered with hospitals to support single mothers. Daniel had signed away most of his parental rights in exchange for supervised visits once a month. Visits he rarely used. Blessing had left Lagos entirely. The Okafor family had retreated from public life, their reputation permanently damaged. And Victoria had become a symbol. Not of revenge, but of resilience. Of what happened when you underestimated the wrong woman. She placed her hand on her belly again. She was 3 months pregnant with her second child, conceived through a donor she'd carefully chosen. Samuel played with blocks on the floor nearby. Your grandfather was right, Samuel, she whispered, watching her son. Patience is the greatest weapon. And kindness backed by strength is the greatest power. Outside her window, Lagos stretched out before her. A city full of people who now knew her story. A city where her foundation was changing lives every single day. Victoria smiled softly. Not with bitterness or triumph, but with peace. She had taken her pain and turned it into purpose. She had taken her father's legacy and used it to help others. She had shown Daniel and his family exactly what they'd lost when they underestimated her. And she had done it all without losing herself in the process. That, she thought, was the greatest victory of all. We've come to the end of today's story. I hope it touched your heart. Thanks for watching and staying with us till the end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. See you in the next one. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from?